The police cruiser's lights painted the campus gates red and blue, slicing to the quiet like a wound that refused to close. Marcus Reed stood frozen on the sidewalk, backpack hanging from one shoulder, phone still lit in his hand with a text he hadn't finished sending. The fall air smelled like wet leaves and metal. Somewhere behind him, a group of students whispered, their voices thinning as they backed away. "Hands where I can see them," the officer said, already moving closer. Marcus complied, palms up, heart pounding so hard it blurred the edges of his vision. He had done this walk 100 times. Library to dorm, head down, music on. Nothing about tonight was different, except the way the officer's eyes skimmed over him, sharp and dismissive, as if Marcus were already guilty of something unspeakable. "What's the problem?" Marcus asked, forcing his voice to stay steady. The officer snorted. "You fit the description." Cold cuffs snapped around Marcus's wrists. The sound echoed, final, humiliating. Phones came out. Someone laughed nervously. Marcus felt the heat rise in his face, not from fear alone, but from the certainty that this moment would follow him long after the bruises faded. As he was pushed toward the cruiser, Marcus caught a glimpse of the administration building ahead, its windows glowing warmly against the night. His father's office was still lit on the top floor. The officer leaned in close, breath heavy with coffee. "People like you always think you belong here," he murmured. The cruiser door slammed shut. Across the quad, the dean's office light flicked off. Marcus Reed noticed the police cruiser before it noticed him. He slowed his steps, instinctive, like prey sensing a shadow. The blue lights weren't on yet, but the engine idled too loudly for comfort. He adjusted his backpack strap and kept walking, eyes forward, breath measured. "Hey!" a voice called out. "You." Marcus stopped. "Yes." He turned, careful, hands visible. Officer Daniel Harlan stepped out of the cruiser, one hand resting near his belt. "Where you headed?" "My dorm." "Oak Hall," Marcus said. "I'm a student here." Harlan's eyes flicked over him. "Hoodie." "Jeans." "Brown skin." "ID." Marcus reached slowly for his wallet. "It's in my pocket." "Slow," Harlan warned. Marcus handed over his campus ID. Harlan studied it longer than necessary. "Marcus Reed." Harlan read aloud. "What are you doing out so late?" "It's not late," Marcus said. "It's 10. Harlan smiled thinly. "Funny, we had a report." "A report of what?" "Suspicious activity." Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest. "What does that mean?" Harlan ignored the question. "You matched the description." "What description?" Marcus asked. Harlan stepped closer. "Don't get smart." Students began to gather at a distance. Marcus could feel their eyes, the weight of being watched but not helped. "I haven't done anything," Marcus said quietly. "Turn around," Harlan ordered. "For what reason?" Marcus asked, voice shaking despite himself. Harlan's hand closed around Marcus's arm. "For resisting." "I'm not resisting," Marcus said. "I'm asking why." The cuffs came out. "Cold. Heavy." "Stop," Marcus said. "Please." "Should have thought about that earlier," Harlan replied. Metal bit into Marcus's wrists. Someone gasped. A phone camera clicked on. "This is campus," Marcus said. "You can check. I live here." Harlan shoved him forward. "You people always say that." Marcus froze. "You people?" Harlan leaned close. "Don't make this harder." Heat flooded Marcus's face. Anger, fear, humiliation braided together until he couldn't separate them. "Am I under arrest?" Marcus asked. "Now you are," Harlan said. As they walked, Marcus searched faces in the crowd. A girl he recognized from class looked away. A guy whispered, "Damn." No one stepped forward. Harlan opened the cruiser door. "Get in." Marcus hesitated. "Can I call someone?" "You'll get your call," Harlan said. "Later." The door slammed. Darkness swallowed the sound. Inside the cruiser, Marcus's reflection stared back at him in the glass. Smaller, contained, already judged. His phone buzzed once in his pocket, then went silent. The car pulled away. Marcus closed his eyes and pictured his father's office, the shelves of books, the framed mission statement about equity and inclusion. He wondered how words could feel so far from truth. At the edge of campus, the lights turned red. The cruiser stopped. Harlan glanced back. "You got a real good lawyer, kid?" Marcus met his eyes. "My father's the dean." For the first time, Harlan's smile faltered. The light turned green. The fluorescent lights of the precinct were harsh, humming overhead like a constant accusation. Marcus sat on a hard plastic bench, wrists still tender from the cuffs. The metallic scent of the room mixing with bleach and the faint tang of fear. Every shadow seemed to move faster than it should, the way the corners of his vision blurred when your heart refuses to slow. "ID?" a young officer asked, barely looking up from the clipboard. Marcus handed it over, careful not to fidget. Every small gesture felt loaded, as if one wrong twitch could be interpreted as guilt. He watched her glance at his campus ID, and then look away. No nod, no comment, just paperwork. "Name," the officer droned. "Date of birth." "Marcus Reed," he said. He wondered if it sounded too formal, like he was trying to prove something. "Occupation," she continued. Marcus hesitated a fraction, caught off guard. He had to say student, though the word felt empty here, useless. "Graduate student, University of Hartwell." He finally managed. Harlan's shadow fell across the room as he leaned against the doorway, watching. Marcus could see the smirk forming, like a predator enjoying the discomfort of prey. "Make sure he's thorough," Harlan said casually to the officer. "Don't miss anything." Marcus sank lower on the bench, hoping to disappear into himself. He had been careful all his life. Never late, always polite, never a reason for suspicion. And yet, here he was. The processing officer glanced up at Harlan nervously. "He's a student?" she asked. "Yeah," Harlan said, voice flat. "A student who matches the description." He tapped the cuffs. "Now go." Marcus's stomach twisted. "Description of what?" he asked, his voice low. "Suspicious," Harlan said, then turned on his heel. His boots echoed against the concrete floor, leaving Marcus feeling both abandoned and watched. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Marcus noticed the other detainees, men and women of all ages, some quiet, some yelling. Some had been here longer than him. Some seemed resigned to the routine. Marcus had never considered how deeply the system could hum, how it operated mechanically, grinding people into statistics before anyone even noticed. He realized, painfully, that this was his first glimpse. A man with a clipboard arrived, introducing himself as a public defender. "Keep calm," he said, scribbling notes. "Don't argue. Be polite. You've got a fight ahead, but we'll see what we can do." Marcus wanted to ask why being polite had a matter when he hadn't done anything wrong, but the words lodged in his throat. Harlan reappeared suddenly, holding a folder. "I filed a report," he said, flipping through it with exaggerated care. "Details are comprehensive. You're lucky I'm thorough." Comprehensive. Marcus read the words as they spilled across the page. Subject matches a suspicious profile. Refuse initial commands. Non-compliant behavior observed. He wanted to shout, to point out that he had done nothing but walk across campus. Instead, he sat, trembling slightly, counting his breaths. A new officer came in, dropping a tray of belongings. Marcus retrieved his backpack, emptied, bag checked, laptop taken for inspection. It felt like a violation in a way that words could barely contain. His personal space, his routine, even the comfort of the air around him had been invaded. The room buzzed with chatter and static. Someone mumbled, "He didn't do anything." Another voice laughed, a hollow sound. Marcus flinched, noticing how quickly empathy could be silenced, buried beneath procedure. He asked again, voice low, "Can I call my father now?" The officer shook her head. "Not yet. Standard protocol. Once you're processed." Marcus swallowed hard. Time stretched, suspended in a haze of fluorescent light and quiet shame. Eventually, Harlan returned to deliver the final blow of humiliation. "Campus people always think rules don't apply to them," he said, leaning close so Marcus could feel the weight of the words on his skin. "You think your father's position will save you? Not tonight." Marcus's chest tightened. He wanted to believe the system, wanted to trust the law, the people, even the officers who seemed younger, uncertain, maybe human under the uniform. But trust had its price, and he had already paid tonight. The fingerprinting and photographing began. Each press of the scanner, each click of the camera, etched a permanent reminder of a night that shouldn't exist. Marcus forced himself to focus on small details. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the way a poster on the wall advertised community policing, the irony hitting like a fist to the gut. He repeated his mantra quietly in his head. I belong. I belong. I belong. Hours later, the public defender returned. You can go, he said, handing Marcus a small slip of paper. Bail posted. You're free. For now. Don't make waves. And call someone you trust. Marcus nodded, exhausted. He retrieved his belongings, noticing the damp chill of the metal handcuffs lingering on his wrists. The precinct felt smaller, darker, more hostile now that he was leaving, carrying the weight of observation and judgment with him. Outside, night had deepened. The campus was quieter, but he noticed every flicker of light in the dorm windows. Each window seemed to mock him with normalcy. He walked toward Oak Hall slowly, backpack heavier than usual, burdened not with books but with the knowledge that he had been seen, marked, judged for nothing more than the color of his skin. His phone buzzed again, messages from friends, worried and confused. He typed back slowly, uncertain if his words could convey the hum of injustice that filled him. His father's office loomed in the distance, top floor still illuminated. Marcus considered calling, hesitated, and let it ring. In the quiet street, a single thought repeated in his mind. People like him always think they belong. But tonight, belonging felt impossible. And somewhere in the darkness, Officer Harlan watched, as if the night itself belonged to him. The dean's office smelled of old books and polished wood, a faint trace of his father's cologne lingering in the air like a memory that wouldn't fade. Marcus pushed open the heavy glass door, the small bell above it ringing sharply, startling him. Dean Thomas Reed looked up from a pile of papers, eyes widening as they settled on his son. Marcus. His voice was measured, but the tension was immediate. What happened? Marcus took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in his voice. I was arrested, he said, and the words sounded almost foreign in the quiet office. On campus. Dean Reed's face tightened. He set down his pen, slowly rising. Arrested? Here? On campus. His voice grew sharper with every word, the disbelief coloring him more than anger. By whom? Officer Daniel Harlan. Marcus's jaw clenched. He avoided his father's eyes, afraid he might see his humiliation mirrored back. He said I matched the description. He cuffed me. Dean Reed ran a hand over his face, leaning back against the edge of his mahogany desk. Harlan. His voice was sharp now, disbelief giving way to controlled fury. That's unacceptable. He paused, glancing toward the office door. I need to know every detail. Marcus. Every single thing that happened. Marcus recounted the arrest slowly, each where a small wound reopened. The handcuffs, the public humiliation, the whispers of bystanders, Harlan's words. You people always think you belong here. He could still hear them, echoing inside his head. Dean Reed listened silently, jaw tight, eyes narrowing at every description of Harlan's conduct. When Marcus finished, a heavy silence filled the room. This is outrageous, Dean Reed finally said. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. I'll have to speak with campus security, the lawyers. We need to act carefully. But Marcus, he looked at his son again, softer now, almost fearful. I want you to know this is not your fault. Not in any way. You did nothing wrong. I know, Marcus said, though he didn't. He had always believed in fairness, in merit and effort. Tonight, those principles had been stripped away by cuffs and flashing lights. I want to understand why this happened. Dean Reed shook his head. I wish I could tell you why people abuse their authority like this. But right now, we need to manage the situation. The university will be delicate. They'll worry about optics, about the image, not the facts. Marcus's stomach nodded. So what do we do? Can we file a complaint? Press charges. We will, Dean Reed said firmly, but it has to be strategic. Institutions don't act on outrage. They act on leverage, precedent, and sometimes media attention. I'm sorry. It shouldn't be this way, but it is. Marcus felt a surge of frustration, anger, and helplessness collide. He had faced microaggressions, whispered slights, assumptions before, but never an outright abuse of power so blatant and sanctioned. And now the very institution his father ran felt like a labyrinth of caution and compromise, where justice would only arrive slowly, if at all. I feel so small, Marcus admitted quietly, almost ashamed of the admission. You're not small, his father said, eyes locked onto his own. You're being unfairly targeted, yes, but your response matters. Your dignity matters. You can't let them take that from you. Not even Harlan. Not even the bureaucracy. Hold on to yourself, Marcus. Marcus nodded, swallowing. The words offered little comfort against the humiliation still burning in his chest, but they were a lifeline nonetheless. Dean Reed stood and walked to the window, looking out over the campus bathed in dim night lights. I've dealt with incidents like this before, he admitted softly. Mostly complaints from students of color about security overreach. Profiling, it's systemic. But every single time, it feels like we're caught between two worlds, what is right and what is tolerated. Marcus sat quietly listening. Systemic. The word felt heavier now than ever. It wasn't just Harlan. It was the policies, the silence, the bystanders who didn't speak up. The machinery of prejudice was vast, and tonight it had consumed him. Dean Reed turned back resolute. We'll proceed carefully. I will speak with campus council. Prepare statements. We'll document everything. But Marcus, be prepared. This will not be easy. It will not be painless. People will have opinions. So defend Harlan. Others will want us quiet. Some will whisper behind closed doors that you brought this upon yourself. Don't believe it. It's a lie. Marcus swallowed again, nodding. The words felt like armor, yet was light, almost insubstantial against the weight of public humiliation and personal betrayal. He glanced at the desk, at the neatly stacked papers, awards, and photos of the university's milestones. The place seemed so orderly, so controlled, and yet tonight it felt powerless to shield him. Even his father, with all his authority, had limits. Authority didn't always equal justice. What about Harlan? Marcus asked finally. Is he going to get in trouble? Dean Reed's expression darkened. If there is proof of misconduct, yes. But the system protects its own. Harlan has complaints. Minor ones, mostly dismissed, but nothing formal that sticks. We'll need evidence, witnesses, and even then, change should be painfully slow. That's the world we live in. Marcus exhaled slowly, a mixture of resignation and resolve. He had always trusted the university to be fair, to reflect its mission statements. Tonight, he realized trust alone wasn't enough. Courage, documentation, and persistence were required, and maybe even then it wasn't guaranteed. His father sat back down across from him. I want you to finish your degree, Marcus. Don't let this incident define your trajectory. You're stronger than you realize, stronger than Harlan thinks. Marcus met his father's gaze, the weight of inheritance, not wealth, but resilience, pressing upon him. I'll try, he said. But even as he spoke, the words felt inadequate against the humiliation, the exposure, and the pervasive sense that tonight the world had turned against him for the color of his skin. Dean Reed nodded, a shadow crossing his face. We'll fight this together, but you need to understand, systemic problems don't bend to anger or logic alone. You have to wield patience, strategy, and resilience. That's the only way forward. Marcus sank into the chair, silent, absorbing the enormity of what lay ahead. He pictured the arrest, Harlan's smirk, the cuffs biting into his skin, the flashing lights, the whispers. The injustice was not erased, not diminished by his father's words, but it was seen, witnessed, not entirely invisible. And in that small recognition, Marcus felt the first flicker of resolve. Outside, the campus was quiet. The glow from dorm windows marked life continuing, indifferent to the night's humiliation. Somewhere in the darkness, Officer Harlan existed too, unaware that his actions had just triggered a reckoning he hadn't anticipated. Marcus's phone buzzed, a news alert about a minor campus incident. He opened it, hand still trembling, and scrolled past headlines that barely scratched the truth. But for the first time that night, he felt a sliver of clarity. This story wasn't over. It had just begun. The chill of early November hadn't deterred students from walking across the campus quad, their scarves flapping, backpacks bouncing against their backs. Marcus felt the weight of his own presence differently now, more visible, more scrutinized. Every glance from a passerby seemed loaded with curiosity, judgment, or pity. He walked alongside his friend Jasmine Clark, who had texted him as soon as she'd heard about the arrest. "I can't believe Harlan did that," Jasmine said quietly, matching his pace. Her eyes darted nervously around them. "Did he touch you? Threaten you?" Marcus exhaled sharply, his breath misting in the cold air. "He cuffed me, called me suspicious, said I was the type of person who thinks they belong." He shook his head. The word still carried weight, sharper than any blow. Jasmine flinched. "He's done stuff like that before," she said. "I heard rumors, students he stopped, profiles he's written, mostly whitewashing complaints. Campus security covers for him because, tenure connections." Marcus kept walking, absorbing it all. Patterns. That was the word that lodged in his mind. Harlan wasn't a one-off. He was a thread woven into a fabric of systemic behavior, protected by indifference, by silence, by the same bureaucracy his father had warned him about. "People keep saying it's an isolated incident," Marcus said, voice low. "But I can see it. I've seen it tonight. And I've been part of it, whether I wanted to or not." Jasmine stopped at the library entrance and turned to him. "Marcus, I've been collecting stories. Quiet ones no one wants to publish. You could help. You could speak out." Marcus hesitated. Speaking out meant exposure. It meant reliving the night over and over. But staying silent felt like surrender. "I don't know," he said. "I'm still raw. And if Harlan files something false against me, then we fight it." Jasmine said firmly, "We document. We have proof. People are starting to pay attention, even if the administration isn't moving fast enough." Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. He thought about the other students he glimpsed at the precinct, their faces etched with weariness and resignation. Some were like him, forced to navigate a world that viewed them as inherently suspicious. Some weren't as lucky, their stories buried in paperwork, in dismissals and silence. Back at Oak Hall, Marcus's dorm room felt smaller, suffocating even. He sat at his desk, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keys. He started researching Harlan's history, scanning forums, past complaints, student blogs. Names, dates, incidents, all patterns repeating. Minor suspensions, internal investigations dismissed. Never a public reprimand. Never accountability. The weight of inevitability pressed on him. This wasn't just about one man. It was about an entire system designed to tolerate abuse. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the images of flashing lights, the cold metal cuffs, the whispers of the crowd, the sneering authority of a man who seemed untouchable. His phone buzzed. A student journalist from the campus newspaper, Caleb, had texted, "Got a tip. Want to talk about Harlan? We need your account. Could help." Marcus stared at the screen, fingers trembling. He knew the power of the media, how quickly stories spread, how narratives were shaped. But he also knew the risk, backlash, threats, doubt cast on his credibility. He replied carefully, "I'll meet. Need to be safe. Don't want to jeopardize anyone else." The next day, Marcus met Caleb in a small, dimly lit coffee shop near campus. Caleb, a wiry student with glasses sliding down his nose, looked up at him, earnest and nervous. "Marcus," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "thank you for coming. People need to know what's happening. Harlan isn't just profiling you. He's creating a pattern that's harming students across campus." Marcus nodded. "I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for myself, and what I saw and felt." Caleb scribbled furiously, glancing up occasionally. "You're brave," he said. "I know it doesn't feel that way." "I'm not sure it's bravery," Marcus said quietly. "It's survival. Try and make sense of what's happening, and not let it break me entirely. Caleb paused. You're part of a larger story, Marcus. Others have come forward. We're piecing together a pattern. Incidents that have been swept under the rug. You're not alone. Marcus swallowed. Alone had felt like the default for so long. But hearing Caleb say it, the word, the assurance, felt like a tether, a lifeline to a broader truth. Back in his dorm room, Marcus received a string of messages from friends who had seen the news clips of his arrest. Some offered support, some whispered caution, some expressed outrage he couldn't articulate. The campus was buzzing. Harlan's actions were no longer isolated, the pattern now visible to anyone willing to look. Marcus felt the first flicker of clarity in days. Visibility mattered. Exposure mattered. Documentation mattered. The system may have been slow, the bureaucracy reluctant, but the early morning light streamed to blinds of Marcus's dorm room, falling across his laptop keyboard like a spotlight. He stared at the screen, eyes scanning the grainy video clip again and again. Someone had recorded the arrest. The flashing lights, the cuffs snapping, Harlan's sneer, and the whispers of bystanders frozen in time. The footage was undeniable, visceral. Every detail confirmed what Marcus had lived, yet seeing it outside his own memory made the humiliation sharp all over again. The first wave of notifications hit almost immediately. His phone buzzed incessantly. Texts, emails, social media mentions. Students tagged him, sharing the clip, expressing outrage, asking questions. Some messages were supportive, some venomous. The hate was as immediate as the empathy. He sank into his chair, fists tightening around the edge of his desk. Jasmine had warned him, but the reality was far harsher. Online outrage could be a weapon and a shield at the same time. The clip was viral within hours. By midday, even local news outlets had picked it up. Headlines blurred together. Graduate student wrongfully arrested on campus. Campus officer under scrutiny. Video sparks debate over profiling in universities. Marcus felt the room shrink around him. He wasn't just a student who had been arrested. He was now a symbol, a story, a cautionary tale, and a rallying point. By late morning, the dean's office called. Marcus's father, Dean Thomas Reed, sounded tense but resolute. Marcus, I know it's overwhelming, but you have to prepare yourself. The media is going to want statements. The internal review board will want your account. We need you precise, careful, calm. I can't calm down, Marcus said, his voice tight. Every time I see that video, I feel it all over again, the cuffs, his words, the whispers of the fear. Dean Reed sighed. I know, son. I know, but you have a duty to speak your truth, not just for yourself, but for others who might not have the platform to be heard. This is bigger than one night. This is about accountability. Hours later, Marcus arrived at the internal review boardroom, a conference space bathed in fluorescent light and sterile formality. University lawyers and administrators filled the seats, their expressions carefully neutral, professional. Marcus felt every glance as if it were a probe, each scribble on a notepad of judgment. The board chairwoman spoke first, her voice clipped and official. Mr. Reed, we are here to review the events of November 11th. Please recount the night's events as accurately as possible. Your full cooperation is expected. Marcus nodded, swallowing. I was walking across campus around 10 p.m. I was headed to Oak Hall. A police cruiser pulled up, Officer Daniel Harlan exited, and he told me I matched the description. He handcuffed me, called me suspicious, and I was arrested. He paused, letting the words sink into the room. The board listened silently, faces unreadable. Marcus felt the weight of observation. Every second stretched painfully. Did you resist? One administrator asked. No, Marcus said, steadying himself. I asked why. I complied. I did everything I could to follow instructions. Yet he still handcuffed me, publicly humiliated me, and filed a report with inaccuracies. The review continued, delving into minutiae, timestamps, statement from bystanders, and Harlan's report. Marcus answered each question honestly, trying not to let anger seep into his tone. He could feel Harlan's shadow over proceedings, though the officer wasn't present. an invisible presence, confident that bureaucracy would protect him. Afterwards, he met with Caleb, the student journalist. Caleb's hands shook as he held his notebook. This is bigger than we thought, he said. Your testimony, the video, everything. It's going to force the administration to respond. And the media, they're waiting. Marcus exhaled slowly, heart still hammering. I just want it over, he admitted. I don't want to be anyone's symbol. I just want justice. Caleb nodded. I get it. But sometimes being seen is the first step. They can't ignore a pattern when there's proof, video, witnesses. This is your voice amplified. By evening, the clip had made national news. Online comments ranged from outrage to disbelief, from support to vitriol. Marcus read a few carefully, then set the phone down. It was too much, too personal, too public, and yet he couldn't turn away. Later, in his dorm room, he received a knock at the door. Jasmine entered, carrying her laptop. You have to see this, she said, breathless. She turned the screen toward him. A petition had been started. Students, alumni, and faculty signing for Harlan's removal and an independent investigation. Comments were flooding in, solidarity messages alongside personal stories of profiling and harassment. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and overwhelm. Relief that his story wasn't buried, that people were paying attention. Overwhelmed at the sheer scale of what had been unleashed. This is a lot, Marcus whispered. Yes, Jasmine said, but it's necessary. Patterns like Harlan's don't get broken by silence. He nodded. Patterns. That word again, heavy with meaning. Tonight, the pattern would finally be exposed. Harlan's behavior, once invisible and protected, was now on display for all to see. The ripple effects of his actions were undeniable, a web of accountability beginning to form. The next day, the dean's office issued a statement, careful, measured, and oddly distant. The University of Hartwell takes allegations of misconduct seriously. An internal review is underway. All parties will be given the opportunity to provide statements. Marcus read the statement and exhaled slowly. Neutral language, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no apology, but it was a start. It meant the university could no longer pretend nothing had happened. It meant visibility. By midweek, the pressure escalated. Students spoke out in classes, online forums buzzed, and local news reporters knocked at the administration doors. Marcus felt the exhaustion creeping in, the emotional toll of reliving every detail, of fielding questions, of confronting public attention. Yet beneath it, a simmering resolve burned. He thought about the other students he had spoken to, the stories he collected, the quiet witnesses to abuse. Exposure was more than catharsis. It was a tool, a way to prevent future incidents, to ensure patterns of misconduct were no longer invisible. At night, Marcus sat by his window, looking out over the glowing campus. Somewhere, Harlan walked the streets, perhaps unaware that the video, the petitions, the growing outrage had shifted the balance. The pattern was now visible, traceable, undeniable. And Marcus, once a passive participant in the systemic web, was now active, speaking, documenting, insisting on recognition. He exhaled, letting the weight of exposure settle. Justice wasn't instant, it wasn't perfect, and the personal cost was steep, but it was possible. Somewhere in the dark, in the quiet corridors of campus power, Harlan's smirk might have faltered. For the first time, the consequences of his actions were being measured, not by internal whispers, not by protected complaints, but by visibility, testimony, and collective awareness. Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhaustion and determination mingling. The night had been long, but the truth had emerged, and with it, the first real chance for accountability. The moment the video went viral, Marcus realized exposure carried a cost. The campus that had once seemed merely indifferent now felt hostile in ways both subtle and overt. On his way to class, he noticed whispers trailing him like shadows, phones discreetly angled to record, quick glances, half-finished conversations, students pretending not to notice but clearly watching. Marcus! A voice called as he passed the library steps. He turned. It was Caleb, the student journalist, laptop bag slung over one shoulder. You okay? People are talking a lot. "I'm fine," Marcus said, though the lie stuck in his throat. He adjusted his backpack, feeling its weight like an anchor. "I'm just tired," and watched. Caleb's expression was grim. "It's worse than I thought. The backlash. Some students are supportive. Yes, but others not so much. Harlan has allies. The admin is trying to stay neutral, but the optics are tense. People are picking sides." Marcus nodded, heart sinking. He hadn't considered that exposure didn't only bring justice. It also invited resistance. He recalled the murmurs at the review board, the careful avoidance in classrooms, the skeptical eyes of some professors. Suddenly, every hallway, every common room felt like a gauntlet. That evening, he opened his laptop to find messages piled high, anonymous threats, dismissive comments, warnings to stay quiet. One read, "Stop playing the victim. You don't belong here." Another, "Don't think your father can protect you." The venom was sharp, familiar in its coded prejudice. Marcus closed the laptop slowly, his fingers lingering on the edge of the desk. A knock came at the door. Jasmine entered, face tense. "You need be careful," she said. "People are trying to intimidate you, online and offline. Even in classes, I've noticed them staring, waiting for you to react." Marcus exhaled, a mix of frustration and exhaustion. "I thought being visible would help. I thought truth mattered." "It does," Jasmine said. "But truth also makes people uncomfortable. People like Harlan, they double down when threatened, and the system protects them as long as they can." He leaned back, letting the weight of her words sink in. Pushback, that was the right word. Exposure had forced the system to acknowledge the abuse, but it had also provoked it. Harlan, the university, the campus culture, they were all reacting, and Marcus was caught in the crossfire. The next morning, Marcus attended his seminar, trying to focus on his notes. But he could feel the tension in the room. A student he had once spoken to in passing avoided eye contact entirely. Another muttered under her breath when he passed, words too quiet to catch. The professor maintained neutrality, but the subtle cues, eye rolls, shifting in seats, whispered comments, were impossible to ignore. After class, he met with Dean Reed in his office. The dean's face was drawn, the fatigue from navigating institutional politics evident. "Marcus, I need you to stay cautious," he said. "The more public this becomes, the more aggressive the pushback will be. Some will try to intimidate you. Others will try to discredit you. And Harlan, he's not going to take this quietly." Marcus swallowed. "I can handle the backlash," he said, but the truth felt heavier than the words. I hate that I have to." Dean Reed nodded solemnly. "No one should, but sometimes standing up for truth comes with personal cost. That doesn't make it any less important." That night, Marcus and Jasmine compiled a detailed account of the arrest, collecting witness statements and cataloging Harlan's past complaints. Every story, every observation, reinforced a larger pattern, but the emotional toll was exhausting. Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, and watched at every turn. He thought about his father's advice. Patience, strategy, resilience. But resilience didn't prevent exhaustion or fear. He sat back in his chair, massaging his temples, feeling the weight of expectation. From the media, from the university, from himself. 2 days later, the pushback escalated. Marcus found a note slipped under his dorm door. "Stop making trouble, or next time it won't be just words." His stomach twisted. The threats were no longer abstract, no longer confined to online anonymity. They had physical presence, tangible intimidation. He called Jasmine immediately. "It's escalated," he said. "I don't know what to do." "Document everything," she said firmly. "Don't engage. Keep everything recorded. And be careful." The following day, Marcus noticed an officer in plain clothes near the campus entrance, watching him from a distance. Harlan's shadow extended beyond the precinct, beyond video clips, beyond petitions. The systemic protection he enjoyed meant that surveillance, intimidation, and subtle harassment were tools Marcus had to anticipate constantly. By midweek, the university sent out another statement, vague, neutral, yet tinged with caution. The University of Hartwell takes all complaints seriously. Procedures are ongoing. All parties are advised to cooperate fully. Words without weight, meant to placate without taking responsibility. Marcus felt the isolation keenly. Even peers who supported him had to maintain distance, balancing their own safety with advocacy. He realized that systemic racism didn't just manifest in overt abuse. It thrived in the silences, in the small acts of omission, in the fear of reprisals. During lunch in the cafeteria, he overheard a conversation that made his chest tighten. He's making this about race, and honestly, it's making the campus look bad, one student said. I just don't get why he has to drag everyone into this. Marcus's stomach knotted. Not everyone would see the truth. Some would always rationalize, excuse, or dismiss. Some would protect Harlan, consciously or unconsciously. That evening, Marcus met with Caleb again. The story is growing, Caleb said, but the pushback is fierce. The online hate, the threats, you need be careful. Some alumni are complaining. Others are defending you. It's messy. Marcus nodded. I know. It's exhausting. I didn't realize being right could feel so heavy. Caleb leaned back. It's not about being right, Marcus. It's about being seen. About making sure the system can't erase what happened. People will resist. That's normal. But visibility, truth, they're the only weapons you have against people like Harlan. Exhausted, Marcus returned to his dorm room and sank into the chair by his desk. The weight of the night pressed down. The fear, the exhaustion, the unrelenting scrutiny. But beneath it, a small ember glowed. He was still standing. He was still documenting. Still speaking. Still demanding accountability. He reviewed the petitions, the statements, the collected accounts. Every piece of evidence, every voice strengthened the case. Harlan's pattern of abuse, once invisible, was now in full view. The pushback was fierce, systemic, and pervasive, but so was the truth. As he closed his laptop, Marcus exhaled slowly. Fear and exhaustion would not vanish, but they also would not define him. Resistance, intimidation, and threats could push, prod, and unnerve, but they could not erase reality. Somewhere on campus, Officer Harlan moved confidently, unaware that every action had left a trail. Patterns, Marcus realized, were like footprints in sand, visible to anyone paying attention. And now, he had made sure they could not be ignored. The night settled around him. Lights in the dorm flickered softly. Marcus's hands rested on the desk, his mind alive with strategy, planning, and determination. The pushback was real, heavy, and personal, but it was also evidence of progress. The battle for accountability had just begun. The large conference room was suffocating, not because of its size, but because of the tension that hung like thick smoke. Marcus Reed entered cautiously, suit jacket slightly stiff from hours of sitting in preparation. His father, Dean Thomas Reed, gave him a small nod from the front row, encouragement wrapped in a weight of worry. Today, Marcus would face Officer Daniel Harlan in the university's formal disciplinary hearing. The board members filed in one by one, administrators, legal counsel, and 3 faculty representatives, each maintaining a neutral, professional exterior. At the center, a raised podium held microphones and stacks of papers. Harlan sat opposite Marcus, posture rigid, smirk fixed like armor. Marcus could feel the collective eyes in the room, measuring him, judging him, anticipating reactions. Mr. Reed, the hearing chairwoman began, voice clipped and deliberate. Please recount the events of November 11th, including your interaction with Officer Harlan. Stick to factual details. Opinions and conjecture will be noted separately. Marcus inhaled, steadying himself. The memory of flashing lights, cuffs snapping, whispers from bystanders, and Harlan's sneer pressing on him. He spoke slowly, deliberately. I was walking to Oak Hall around 10 p.m. I noticed a cruiser. Officer Harlan approached me, asked for ID, and then, without explanation, handcuffed me, alleging I matched a suspicious description. I complied fully with his instructions. I asked questions politely. I did not resist. The entire encounter lasted roughly 15 minutes before I was placed in the cruiser. Harlan's lips twitched, a smirk threatening but controlled. That's not accurate, he said smoothly, leaning forward. I observed noncompliant behavior. The subject questioned my authority repeatedly, hesitated when asked for identification. Hesitation can indicate guilt. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he stayed calm. "Officer Harlan," he said, eyes locked on the man, "hesitation is not evidence of guilt. It is not justification for public humiliation, cuffing, or arrest. The incident was recorded. The video demonstrates my compliance at every stage. I was not guilty of any wrongdoing." A murmur rippled through the board. Harlan's lawyer cleared his throat. The officer followed standard procedure. Any perception of racial profiling is subjective and cannot be confirmed without further evidence. Marcus's jaw clenched. The words were familiar. Minimization, deflection, shifting blame. He could feel the history behind them. Complaints ignored, patterns buried, authority shielded by bureaucracy. But he refused to be silenced. Several students were called to testify. One, a classmate who had witnessed the initial encounter from across the quad, spoke first. "He complied the entire time," she said firmly. "He didn't resist." Harlan was aggressive and unnecessary. Her voice was calm, but her hand shook slightly. Another student, who had also been previously stopped by Harlan, added, "I've seen him profile students, especially black students. It happens more often than people realize, but no one wants to speak up. Marcus's case is just the most visible." Each testimony added weight, each word layering the truth over Harlan's offense. Marcus felt a growing sense of validation, but also responsibility. Every recounting required him to relive the humiliation, every detail a small reopening of old wounds. The chairwoman called Harlan to respond. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "the board has reviewed all statements and video evidence. Please address the discrepancies." Harlan's smirk faltered slightly, though he maintained composure. "The video is selective," he said. "It doesn't capture my perspective or the perceived threat at the time. I acted according to my training." Marcus stood, voice firm. "Perception does not excuse abuse of power. I followed instructions fully, yet I was publicly humiliated. I have documented complaints against you from other students. Your behavior is part of a larger pattern, not an isolated misunderstanding." Silence fell. The room held its breath, absorbing the gravity of the statement. Harlan's posture stiffened. Authority alone could not erase evidence and testimony stacking against him. The hearing continued for hours. Every statement, every piece of video evidence, every prior complaint was examined. Marcus recounted the night repeatedly, each time a little harder, each time forcing Harlan's behavior into the light. Faculty and administrators asked pointed questions, probing inconsistencies in Harlan's report. Slowly, the veneer control he had maintained began to crack. Outside the room, Caleb was waiting, laptop open, recording reactions. Jasmine hovered nearby, offering quiet support. Marcus felt the network around him, the students, journalists, family, like a shield. Each person who believed him, each story corroborating his account, became armor against the intimidation he had endured for weeks. Near the end of the hearing, Harlan's composure finally slipped. His voice, once smooth and measured, grew sharp. "You're all exaggerating." He resisted. He challenged authority. Marcus stood taller, feeling the adrenaline surge. "I did not resist. I asked questions politely. You humiliated me because of my skin. The video proves it. Witnesses prove it. You are not above accountability." For the first time, Harlan hesitated. The board members exchanged glances. Notes passed quietly, eyebrows raised. The weight of exposure was undeniable. No deflection, no bluster could erase the evidence, the testimony, the growing pattern of complaints now visible to everyone in the room. Dean Reed finally spoke, quietly but firmly. "This board is not here to debate the officer's perception. It is here to review conduct. We have documented misconduct, witness statements, and video evidence. Patterns exist. They demand recognition. No person is above accountability, no matter their position." Marcus exhaled, letting the words sink in. The combination of evidence, testimony, and formal scrutiny had shifted the balance. Harlan's arrogance could no longer shield him. The authority he wielded casually was now constrained by visibility, documentation, and collective acknowledgement of wrongdoing. By the end of the day, the chairwoman delivered preliminary findings. The board recognizes evidence of misconduct. Officer Harlan's actions violated university policies regarding student treatment and campus policing. Recommendations for disciplinary action, up to and including termination, will be submitted to the administration. The board acknowledges the courage of witnesses and Mr. Reed in providing testimony. Marcus felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The hearing was over, but the emotional cost lingered. Reliving the night, facing Harlan, testifying repeatedly, it had been draining, emotionally and mentally. Yet justice, partial though it was, had been acknowledged. Outside the hearing room, the campus felt different. Students approached Marcus quietly, nodding, offering small words of support. The network of validation, once fragile, now felt tangible. Every voice speaking truth had shifted the power balance slightly, exposing systemic patterns and the consequences of abuse. Harlan exited quietly, eyes avoiding Marcus. The once confident officer now walked carefully, aware that the institutional shield he relied on had cracks. The patterns of abuse he thought invisible were now traced, documented, and exposed. Marcus returned to his dorm that evening, exhaustion pressing on him like lead, yet beneath it a quiet satisfaction. The hearing had not erased the trauma, the humiliation, or the personal cost, but it had delivered accountability. For the first time, he felt that systems, however slow and reluctant, could be made to bend toward justice. He sat by the window, watching the campus lights flicker against the dark sky. Patterns that once protected abuse were now illuminated. Exposure, documentation, persistence, they mattered. He realized that standing up, despite pushback, fear, and fatigue, could transform vulnerability into strength. For Marcus Reed, the night was still young. Justice wasn't complete. Healing wasn't instant, and Harlan's reckoning was ongoing, but the balance had shifted. The abuser's control had been challenged, his pattern exposed. Marcus had survived, spoken, and ensured that truth could no longer be ignored. The campus was quieter than usual that morning, the kind of early silence that made every rustle wind against the trees sound louder, more deliberate. Marcus walked across the quad with measured steps, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning familiar paths now tinged with a strange sense of vigilance. The arrest, the viral video, the hearing, it all felt surreal, like a nightmare he was only half awake from. He reached Oak Hall and paused for a moment, staring at the entrance. The building had always represented normalcy, study, and routine. Tonight, it also symbolized endurance, survival, and truth. He inhaled, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. Nothing could erase the humiliation he had endured, the fear, the whispers, the threats, but the acknowledgement of wrongdoing had shifted something fundamental. Harlan's power, once absolute in his eyes, was now constrained by visibility and accountability. Dean Reed met him at the door, expressing a mixture of pride and lingering worry. "Marcus," he said, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder, "the board's recommendations have been accepted. Harlan has been suspended pending full review, and disciplinary actions are expected to follow. The administration is also reviewing broader campus security policies." Marcus nodded slowly, the news settling into him with a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Justice, even partial, had been delivered, but the emotional cost was heavy. Every word spoken during the hearing, every replayed video frame, had left traces on him. Humiliation, fear, anxiety. The system could bend toward accountability, yes, but the scars remained. Does it feel like enough? Dean Reed asked softly, eyes searching his son's. Marcus shook his head. "It's not enough," he admitted quietly. "It's progress. But it doesn't undo the night. It doesn't undo how it felt to be treated like that, in front of everyone." "You're right," Dean Reed said. "No policy, no suspension, no public acknowledgement can erase trauma. But this is change, and it's meaningful. You've made a difference, not just for yourself, but for others who may never have spoken up." Marcus exhaled slowly, letting the words resonate. He thought about the students who had come forward quietly, the petitions, the witness statements, the media attention. His experience had been the catalyst, but the collective voice had made the impact real. Patterns of abuse, once invisible, were now exposed, scrutinized, and constrained. Later that day, Marcus met Jasmine in the student center, where they had first begun piecing together witness accounts and evidence. The room buzzed with students and staff, yet Marcus felt a calm presence in her company. "You did it," Jasmine said softly, handing him a cup of coffee. "You stood up, faced Harlan, and made the system acknowledge the truth. That's rare. Brave." Marcus took a sip, eyes on the window, watching leaves swirl in the autumn wind. "It doesn't feel brave," he said. "It feels necessary. Like I had no choice but confront it. The system wouldn't have changed if I hadn't spoken up." "Necessary is brave," she said, voice firm. "And it matters. For every student who's been profiled, intimidated, silenced, they'll know someone stood up, that it can be challenged." Marcus nodded, letting the weight of her words settle. Visibility, documentation, persistence, they mattered. The pattern of abuse that had seemed insurmountable was now challenged, partially dismantled and constrained. But he understood that vigilance was ongoing. One victory didn't erase systemic injustice. Over the next few weeks, the campus slowly began to shift. Harlan was formally suspended, and the administration initiated reviews of campus policing practices. Training programs were implemented, complaint systems revised, and oversight mechanisms strengthened. It was not perfect, and it was not complete, but it was change. Marcus noticed small differences in daily interactions. Students who had once whispered or avoided him now nodded in recognition, offered quiet encouragement, shared stories of microaggressions they had endured. The campus, while still flawed, felt incrementally more accountable. He also realized the personal cost remained. Even with justice, even with the exposure of systemic abuse, he carried traces of that night. Flashbacks of flashing lights, cuffs snapping, whispers, and Harlan's smirk. Trauma did not disappear with suspension or policy change, but resilience had been forged in the fire of exposure, advocacy, and truth-telling. One evening, Marcus returned to his dorm room and opened his laptop. Notifications from friends, news articles, and updates from students filled the screen. The story was evolving, yet the core truth remained intact. Harlan's misconduct was acknowledged, patterns were exposed, and accountability was in motion. His phone buzzed, a message from a student he didn't know personally. "Thank you for standing up. I've experienced similar things. You gave me courage to speak." Marcus stared at the message, a lump forming in his throat. The personal cost had been immense, but the impact rippled beyond him. Visibility mattered. Speaking out mattered. Later, he walked across the quad, the sun setting behind the university buildings, casting long shadows that stretched across the paths. The campus lights flickered on one by one, illuminating the familiar terrain with a warm, steady glow. Marcus felt the weight of the past weeks pressing against him, yet also a quiet sense of accomplishment. At Oak Hall, he paused to look at the windows where he had been headed the night of the arrest. They glimmered like watchful eyes, reminding him that some things could never be. Unseen, the injustice, the humiliation, the abuse, but also the courage it had taken to confront it. He pulled out his phone and sent a final message to Jasmine. "It's not over, but it's a start, and I feel ready." She replied almost immediately. "Always. You did the hard part." That night, Marcus reflected on the journey, from the humiliation of the arrest, through pushback, exposure, and the hearing, to the slow but meaningful changes on campus. The arc of the story was clear. The abuser's power had been checked, the systemic pattern exposed, and accountability set in motion. Justice had arrived, imperfect but real, and yet Marcus understood the complexity of truth. Poetic justice was not simple revenge. It was recognition, consequence, and enduring change. Harlan would no longer wield unchecked authority. The administration had been forced to act. The student body had witnessed resilience in action, and Marcus, though scarred, had emerged stronger, more vigilant, and more determined. As the night settled over the campus, Marcus sat by his window, watching the gentle sway of trees in the moonlight. The world was imperfect, flawed, and often cruel, but justice, accountability, and courage could make it bend, even if only slightly, toward right. For Marcus Reed, the night was no longer defined by flashing lights and handcuffs, but by the quiet, enduring power of truth, visibility, and resilience. He had survived, spoken, and acted, and in doing so, ensured that patterns of abuse could no longer hide in shadow. Winter had begun to settle over Hartwell University, frost edging the dorm windows and painting the quad in a pale, brittle light. The crisp air mirrored Marcus's own internal state, alert, tense, yet steeled with purpose. The disciplinary hearing had been a victory, but the story was not over. Officer Harlan's suspension was temporary. The administration's review could still falter, and systemic inertia had a way of protecting those in power. Marcus knew he had to push further. He arrived early at the university's administrative building, where the final review session would take place. This session would determine Harlan's fate: termination, retraining, or reinstatement. Marcus's father, Dean Thomas Reed, had insisted on attending, not only as support, but to ensure that due process was followed. The building smelled faintly of polished floors and coffee, the hum of fluorescent lights adding a low, constant tension. Inside the conference room, Harlan sat across the long table, posture rigid, eyes fixed on Marcus with mixture of defiance and thinly veiled irritation. This time, there was no smirk, just a cold, calculating gaze of someone who believed authority was a shield. The board members and legal counsel took their seats, documents and folders arranged meticulously before them. The chairwoman opened the session. This is the final review of Officer Daniel Harlan's conduct and the corresponding disciplinary recommendations. We will hear final statements from all parties. Mr. Reed, you may begin. Marcus inhaled deeply, feeling the familiar coil of adrenaline tighten in his chest. He thought of every witness, every statement, every piece of video evidence meticulously compiled over the past month. He thought of Jasmine and Caleb, of the students whose stories he had collected, and he thought of the night that had ignited everything: the flashing lights, the handcuffs, the whispered humiliation. I want to start by saying that this isn't about vengeance, Marcus began, voice steady but charged with emotion. It's about accountability. Officer Harlan's actions on November 11th were a violation of trust, policy, and decency. He targeted me, publicly humiliated me, and misused the authority granted to him by the university. But it isn't just about me. It's about patterns of abuse, profiling, and unchecked power that affect many students, many lives. The evidence is clear. This was not an isolated incident. It was systemic. Harlan's jaw tightened. His lawyer interjected, voice measured. The officer followed procedure and exercised discretion in a challenging situation. Any claims of bias are unsubstantiated. This is being blown out of proportion for publicity. Marcus met Harlan's gaze directly. Discretion is not the same as intimidation. Observation is not the same as harassment. Authority is not the same as impunity. You humiliated me because of my race, and you've done the same to others. The video doesn't lie. Witnesses don't lie. And neither do the records of past complaints you've left unaddressed. The board members exchanged quiet glances. The room felt electric, tension coiling tight in every corner. The silence that followed Marcus's words was a tangible force, pressing against the pretense of neutrality. Dean Reed leaned forward. The university's mission is to protect all students, regardless of background. Authority carries responsibility. Patterns of misconduct, even when subtle, cannot be ignored. Officer Harlan's behavior demonstrated a failure to uphold the ethical standards we require of campus personnel. This board and this institution must act decisively to prevent future harm. Harlan's hands curled into fists, white knuckles visible on the table. I was doing my job, he muttered, voice cracking slightly. I was following training. He resisted. He questioned my authority. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Questioning authority is not a crime. Asking why you're being targeted is not a crime. Compliance under duress does not justify humiliation or abuse of power. You cannot shield yourself behind procedure when your actions betray your oath to serve and protect. Authority without accountability is tyranny. The board chairwoman cleared her throat. Officer Harlan, we have reviewed all documentation, video evidence, and testimony. There is overwhelming indication that misconduct occurred and that a pattern exists. We must consider severity and the consequences of these actions. Harlan's gaze flicked toward Marcus, a flash of something raw and unguarded passing over his features. Fear, perhaps, or recognition of exposure. Authority alone could no longer protect him. Marcus felt a surge of clarity and resolve. This moment was not just about punishment. It was about recognition, accountability, and setting a precedent. He thought of every student whose story had been dismissed, every complaint quietly swept aside. Standing here, he was not just reclaiming his dignity. He was asserting the right of every student to be treated fairly. The board deliberated, the minutes stretching unbearably long. Marcus and his father waited, silent, the hum of fluorescent lights the only soundtrack. Finally, the chairwoman spoke. After careful consideration and based on the overwhelming evidence of misconduct and systemic patterns, the board recommends the immediate termination of Officer Daniel Harlan. The recommendation is to be implemented by the administration effective immediately. The university will also review and strengthen its campus security oversight and training programs to prevent future incidents of this nature. Marcus's chest tightened, a complex mixture of relief, validation, and lingering trauma flooding him. The outcome was justice, at least in part. The person who had abused power and weaponized prejudice would no longer hold authority over students. Patterns of abuse were exposed, accountability enforced, but the emotional cost remained, etched into his memory. Harlan's expression went pale. The smirk that had once defined him was gone, replaced with stark, helpless awareness. Authority stripped bare. The room felt electric with the finality of recognition and consequence. Dean Reed placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. "Not the scars, but the threat. You've seen justice in action." Marcus exhaled, the tension finally loosening slightly. He realized that poetic justice was not about vengeance. It was about acknowledgement, consequence, and systemic change. Harlan's power, once absolute, had been diminished by truth and visibility. The board's decision ensured that abuse could no longer hide in the shadows. Outside the conference room, students and faculty who had followed the case quietly murmured in approval. The ripple effect of accountability was visible, subtle but undeniable. Marcus walked across the quad, the cold air biting, each step grounding him in reality. The campus was quieter than before, but it now felt more just, more aware. Later, Marcus returned to his dorm, the weight of the past weeks pressing down yet tempered by resolution. Jasmine and Kayla were waiting, smiles tentative but full of relief. "You did it," Jasmine said softly, handing him a warm cup of tea. "You faced him, faced the system, and you made a change." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I didn't do it alone. Everyone who spoke up, everyone who documented, everyone who bore witness. This was collective. The patterns couldn't hide anymore because we refused to let them." Caleb nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Stories like this, they matter. They change the culture, even if slowly. You made a difference." Marcus let the words settle. The fight had been exhausting, harrowing, and painful, but it had also been transformative. The system had responded. Harlan had faced consequences, and the voices of those who had once been silenced were amplified. That night, Marcus looked out his dorm window, watching the glow of campus lights against the dark winter sky. The streets were quiet, the shadows stretching long and sharp, but he felt a steady, resolute strength within himself. Authority could be abused, systems could be slow, and injustice could linger, but truth, visibility, and persistence had been the arc of consequence toward justice. He allowed himself a small, private acknowledgement. He had survived humiliation, exposed abuse, and held power accountable. The scars remained, yes, but they were a testament to resilience. He had acted, spoken, and seen justice partially realized. And in that quiet, resolute night, Marcus understood that accountability, once established, would ripple beyond this moment, beyond this campus. Patterns of abuse could no longer hide, and voices that had once been silenced would continue to demand recognition. For Marcus Reed, the reckoning was complete. Not a clean erasure of pain, but profound affirmation that truth and courage could challenge even the most entrenched systems of abuse. He had endured. He had spoken, and the world, imperfect as it remained, had been forced to respond.